In this video, I'm going to show you the best way to run dungeons as well as the locations you should be running them to achieve the most profit. Now, when it comes to running dungeons here in Albion Online, I will forever recommend running them in the black zone. And that is because the percentages in the black zone are higher than when you run them in the yellows or red zones. So you just get more bonuses overall, as well as we are currently sitting at the Martlock portal, which is a connector into the black zone. If you do not know how to get to a Martlock portal, for example, I went to Martlock, and inside Martlock, I went up these stairs into the Conqueror's Hall, which is this area right here. And you go into this portal. Inside here, there's going to be a portal that you enter. And when you go through that portal, it's going to pop you up into the connecting black zone portal. Every single main city has one. Here's the Thetford portal. We have the Fort Sterling portal. And we have the Limhurst portal and the Bridgewatch portal. Now, this is where we're going to be running them, and I have a tier 7 solo dungeon map. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the map, and I'm going to show you the best and safest method to run these if you're trying to not get dove or you're trying to not get killed. The safest way to run these so that you can just get out into the black zone, run these solo dungeons, grab your loot, and come back safely to cash out with what you receive. Now, the objective of this video is to not be dealing with dungeon divers. We're not in a set to set up to prevent dungeon divers. You can wear a more PvP geared set so that if you do have a dungeon diver, you can try to take the fight, take their loot, and continue clearing the dungeon. The purpose of this video is I put together a 5.1, so that is a tier 5 enchant 1 relative set with a Thetford cape that is tier 4 enchant 1. Everything is outstanding quality. It's a little bit cheaper than excellent. I put a 4.1 bag because it's equivalent to a 5, but cheaper. You don't really need a big bag because you're not going to be getting a lot of heavy stuff in the dungeons. Usually you do one trip and you bring everything back. I have healing pots and roast. The reason I have roast is for the steel 9.45% health the enemy has lost for all the damage I do, as well as I have leech on the spear. Now, this is so that my spear build can have a lot more sustain, as well as we have Bloodlust, which will restore health every single time I do damage up to 9 times in 6 seconds. And I stack that with Forest of Spears, which channels a cone that deals damage every 0.3 seconds. So that'll get all the Bloodlust procs, essentially get all my health back up. This is a dungeon clearing build, Mage Cow with poison, as well as Soldier Boots with a little bit more defense and rejuvenating sprints. This is a budget build, only 213k. You can go 4.1 on this and make it even cheaper, as well as you can go a tier 5 flat cape. You don't have to use a Thetford cape. I know they are a tiny bit more pricey. But on to running the video. So the way that these dungeons work. So in the Royal Continent, which is down here, this is the Royal Continent. When you proc a dungeon scroll, it's going to tell you that you need to be near another zone. So for example, if I'm standing here and I proc a tier 6 scroll, it's going to pop up here. If you're in the city and you try to use a tier 6 dungeon scroll, it's not going to let you because they will not pop up in these zones. They have to pop up in a tier 6 zone. Now, the reason we want to do black zone dungeons is not only for that bonus, but even though these are all tier 5 zones that are connected to the portals, you can run tier 6, 7, 8. It doesn't matter what type of group or solo dungeon you're running. I can stand in this portal and I can use this dungeon, and no matter what, it'll pop up in one of these zones outside of the Martlock portal, even though it's a tier 5. So this is why it's really nice and convenient, and I'll show you why right now. So this is the run. I'm going to run you guys through it. What we're going to do is we're going to proc this tier 7 Grandmaster's dungeon solo map. Okay, that is our location that it popped up. It popped up in Windgrass Gully. So if we look here on our small map, this little green circle is going to indicate where we need to go. So we're going to go to that door. And on this door, there's going to be these invisibility shrines. And they're going to give you invisibility once you grab them for 2 minutes. Now, no one in the black zone is going to be able to see you. You want to use these on your way to the dungeon. Now, if we open up our small map again, we can see here. And let me just get away from all the contact here. They can't even see me. They're just all fighting it out. Our dungeon is going to be up here right next to the door. So all we have to do is we're going to run up there. Now, just remember, no one can see you. You do have the full 2 minutes of invisibility. So we're going to just run all the way up to this dungeon. And I'm going to meet you guys up there. Okay, we are rolling up on the dungeon now. Someone did just zone in, so they probably saw the dungeon. This dungeon will not spawn until I am close to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the dungeon. If you do see a red exclamation mark pop above your head when you were jumping into the dungeon, someone is near. Whether they're invisible or visible, they just saw you go into that dungeon. You do have to be careful. If there's still butterflies in the door, that means there's no one in there. If butterflies are missing, that means someone has at least entered the dungeon, popped out, or they're still sitting in there. Now, we get an invincibility bubble when we come in. It doesn't last long. This is the part where I use the logout timer, and the dungeon after 90 seconds will close. On the outside, it will close, and you will not have access anymore to the dungeon. So anyone on the outside can't dive you once this timer does hit 210. 90 seconds. Not 2 minutes. It's going to be a minute and a half the dungeon closes. I don't know why I said 2 minutes. So it is going to be a minute and a half down to 210. This right here you need to pay attention to. This is the you cannot gain a spawn buff again right now. And when you come into the dungeon, this countdown will start. If you leave the dungeon while this symbol is still up here and it's about to disappear, you will not have a bubble. So right now we did just get dove. He looks like he might try to take a fight here, but this is all you would do. Check this out. So either he's going to A out or he's actually going to try and take this fight. Okay, so he did A out. So the thing is here is if you don't want to PvP, you can leave. This guy might have inspected me and not wanted to take the fight. We could have jumped right through the portal and got our shield back. So that was a kind of an example of someone that was going to be diving us. I wasn't going to try to take contact with him. I was acting as if I don't want to PvP. So I would just jump out of the dungeon and keep moving on with what I was doing. Now, once that countdown is done, so we did have to stop the timer because someone dove us. Just because that guy entered and left, the countdown's still going. So it would still take 90 seconds for the dungeon to close. Obviously, we turned the timer off, so we don't have a 100% idea of when it's actually going to close now. So if we kind of took it down to like 240, just some random number, just kind of do it in your head if it kind of has been in a minute and a half. That is kind of like how you deal with divers when you first come in the dungeon, the safest way possible. You want to wait till the dungeon closes. If a diver does come in, make sure that that debuff that's up here that doesn't allow you to get a shield when you come out is gone before you get out of the dungeon. If he starts attacking you, don't attack back. If you're trying to get out of the dungeon, don't hit him. You can use any abilities you want, like rejuvenating sprint to heal yourself. You can use any abilities you want that don't do damage. So if you had a guardian helm for the shield, if you had a healing staff, just you can't do damage to him or it's going to put you in combat. If you're healing yourself, you're not in combat, so you'll be good to go. But all you have to do is wait out that debuff and then jump out of the dungeon. Okay, now that we know that the dungeon is sealed, I did want to show you guys real quick the percentage that you'll be getting in these dungeons. So I pushed forward in the dungeon a little bit and cleared my way through. We have a boss right here that is guarding a blue chest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take him down, and then we're going to look at the percentage that's in the chest once we open it, because you can see it once you open up any of the loot in here. Okay, the boss is down. Here we have is the blue chest that we can open up. So we're going to smack this open. It's not a very good chest, but as you can see here, we get a 271% black zone bonus, plus a 50% premium bonus if you are rocking premium. But 271% bonus is pretty decent for these dungeons, as it is a tier 7. I believe tier 8 flat is a 388% bonus. So if you want to do tier 8 flat dungeons, I think that's the correct number. I ran them recently. I remember seeing that number, but for these ones, it is the 271%. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to A out of the dungeon instead of leaving from the front door. So we will use the A button, which exits the dungeon, teleports us out right on the spot, and we will pop out with a bubble. So this a corrupted dungeon did spawn on the spot, but this is where our solo dungeon was, and it did disappear. So when you do have this bubble, you can mount up, and then you cannot gain a spawn buff right now for another 40 seconds. So what's going to happen here, and I'll show you guys right now what will happen if you zone out when you don't have the ability to get a bubble when you zone through. So if we go through this entrance the same way as if we exited the dungeon, we're going to pop out on this other side without a bubble. So the thing is that the reason you want to pop out of the dungeon with a bubble, you might be thinking, no, it's only one dungeon diver, I'm not too worried about it. The reason that you want to pop out with a bubble is because in the black zone, a lot of people run in groups. And they might have some people waiting on the outside, waiting for you to make that mistake of popping out without your bubble. If you pop out without your bubble, they can just jump you right on the spot, and you also have a 10 or like 11 second cooldown on all your abilities. Maybe it's like 12 seconds. It's a lot. it's a lot of time for them to be able to nuke you down before you can even use an ability. So you don't want that to happen. So what we would do from here, now that we're out of the dungeon, is we have two options. We can either run back to the entrance of the Martlock portal, and we can also have someone dismounting on us right here. Look at this guy. Or you could use the journey back button, which is 11,000. Right here, it's going to be a little bit cheaper because our set is cheaper and we don't have a lot on us. But you could use this journey back button if you don't want to run back. So all we would do is press this. Just make sure you look at the silver cost as well as the time it's going to take. And we'll just push into a corner right here and use the journey back. And what it'll do is it'll teleport us back to the Martlock portal where we can secure the loot that we got from the dungeon. Okay, we are now back in Martlock with our secured loot, even though it was definitely not a lot of loot. This was we only cleared one blue chest and got the battle axe drop from a mob. But one other thing to keep in mind when you are spawning these dungeons, for example, if it did spawn in Windgrass Gully, sometimes these solo dungeons will spawn like right here. In anywhere in these spots, right outside the Martlock portal door. You need to be very careful when entering these dungeons. If you see an exclamation mark when you enter the dungeon, you need to be very aware that if you dismount and you have an exclamation mark above your head, someone saw you go in that dungeon, and if they dive in right after you, you don't have enough time to get your bubble to get back out of the dungeon for when the fight begins. So you just have to hope that it's only one person, because if you hop out, you're going to be dead, or you're going to have to try and fight them. So you need to be very careful when you get dungeons right here. Sometimes I would even skip them. Like, don't even do a dungeon when it spawns right here. Just go grab another scroll and reproc, because you're not going to want to do the ones right here because it's so close to the divers. Now, if you have ones that pop up a little bit farther or they're not on the roads, those ones are better. As well as if you do run up to the dungeon and you see that people are hanging around, you are still invis. You're not committed to the dungeon yet, so you can kind of see if they even care about the dungeon. If they run by, they don't even check it. Some people aren't dungeon divers. They don't care. They're just running through the zone or gathering or farming or just doing whatever they do. A lot of times there is going to be dungeon divers, so you just need to be very careful and watch how people are behaving, because there's a ton of people that their main content to do from these portals is to get a group together and go out and dive these dungeons. So this is just a blanket safety method that you can use to run these dungeons in the most efficient way possible and to try to mitigate as much risk. Of course, it is still the black zone. You can't mitigate every amount of risk. So if you are worried about losing your loot, or if you're having trouble building up silver and you don't know what kind of sets to run, I do highly recommend checking out my Getting Over Gear Fear video here on the YouTube channel. It will 100% get you set up on your account. It's the method I used when I first started building my account. And you do 15 tier 4 flat or 4.1 sets that are cheap, and you only use those sets to go out into the black zone because you don't care about them. If you lose them, you'll have another 14 sets behind it that you can start using to make some more silver. It's a great way to jumpstart your account. But if you are having trouble with that, make sure to check out that YouTube video as well. That's going to be it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video, and I will see you all in Albion Online.